he says, it's going to happen. It's a fallen world, and therefore, don't give up. Don't allow yourself to become so discouraged that you can't move forward, because I've already overcome. So to me, that's a good foundation. Is a lot of times, especially believers, and maybe all of us are surprised, when a tire goes flat. We're surprised when our kids misbehave. We're surprised. And so again, it's not, I'm just waiting for it to happen, but it's like, no, I've got a spare tire, or I've got a little can of Fix-A-Flat, or I've got, roadside service. Why? Because tires can go flat. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. What am I going to do? Right? And I think that's what Jesus is saying, is that we live in a world where tires go flat.
And we can sit and do nothing with it and be guilty of the crime of omission, or we can leverage it to make kingdom difference.
Welcome to the Troy Gramling Podcast. I'm Neal Oates Jr. here with Pastor Troy Gramling. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I just, I don't know when you might be watching or listening, but I just had another grandchild. This one was born at our house, which is a whole new experience that I didn't experience. I left the house, but I hear it's a whole new experience. It was interesting when the, what do you call the not the nurse, but what's it called? Midwife. There's another doulos.
Doula, yeah.
Anyways, you had them, and it was, and then they leave. At the doctors, at the hospital, they come in every so often, and it's like, it's almost like God intended for us to have children.
Right.
So anyways, been very, very, very good. Locke is his name. So we've got a lion, a Luna, and a Locke.
Okay, now my question, because I think this is going to go into the episode, was this experience what you expected or not?
I have no idea. You know what I'm saying? Here's the thing. All of my three kids were born C-section. So Stephanie couldn't see. They put a little curtain up. They couldn't see. Now, I'm tall, so I could see. I could always see. And I would be like, are you okay? Because I can see what they're doing to you. And but this is one of those things. Amber, it was her last, I don't know if it was her last. She says it's going to be their last. But so she wanted to do it at home. She wanted to do it in the water. And, they did all the preparations and all of those kind of things. So it was an interesting, experience to watch it happen. And even I think about my son, Tyler, and I think, I guess if Stephanie really wanted to do it, I would support her in it, but I'm not good at that. Here's the thing, and anybody here would tell you, when Stephanie, if she gets sick or she's not doing good, I don't do very good.
Oh.
I'm a little codependent.
Okay.
That's probably not healthy. But so I don't know that I would.
So how did Pastor Tyler do?
He did great. He delivered, they tell me, because I wasn't in the room, but he actually delivered the little boy. Now, and the cord was around his neck. So when the boy came out, Locke came out, today, all these names that, Fred, Smith, Jose, we don't do that anymore. But anyways, when he came out, I guess the cord was around, so he had to unwrap the cord. And then I guess when they're born in the water like that, can take up to like 30 seconds before they start breathing. And so they had to, do all that kind of stuff. It's interesting because when he was born real early because the cord was around his neck, and his heart rate when Steph was pregnant and everything kept going down. So he was actually an emergency C-section. So then I got home the day he was born. I was taking care of the older kids, got home, and then they went upstairs and everything. And when I finally saw little Locke, Luna, who's 4, was holding him. So, they were all in the bed there. So storybook ending. I don't know what happened between when I left that morning and when I came back, but I mean, it was like watching Hallmark. You know what I mean? So anyways, for all of you guys out there that are thinking about doing a home birth in a big pool or something a pool like that,
don't talk to you. Talk
that's
to
right.
the people who participate.
From my perspective, it was simple.
Okay. All right. So Pastor Troy, I'm glad you shared that, because that's really going to go into what we're talking about here. What happens, or what do we do when life doesn't go as planned? I know Pastor Tyler and Amber did not expect the umbilical cord to be around little Locke's neck, much like you when Pastor Tyler was born. So we need this thing that we have, or unfortunately that might be necessary, whether it's perseverance, whether it's endurance. What do we do when life does not go as planned? Where do we start?
One is we shouldn't be surprised. Now that doesn't mean we need to expect bad things to happen, but John 16:33 says, in this world, you're going to suffer tribulation, right? He says, these things have I written unto you. Like, in other words, I'm telling you ahead of time so that you know when difficulty comes, and it's going to come, but I've overcome the world. In other words, I'm going to walk with you through this. I've given you victory on the other side of this, but don't be surprised. So, and that, there's a tension in that. There's some people, if anything bad can happen, it's going to happen to me, right? They're cynical. They tend to be negative. So that's not Jesus wasn't saying, hey, I want you to be cynical. He's just basically saying, this is not the world I created. And in this world, evil happens. And it doesn't just happen to those who deserve it. It doesn't just happen to those because of something they have done. He says, it's going to happen. It's a fallen world. And therefore, don't give up. Don't allow yourself to become so discouraged that you can't move forward, because, I've already overcome. So to me, that's a good foundation. Is a lot of times, especially believers, and maybe all of us are surprised. When a tire goes flat, we're surprised. When our kids misbehave, we're surprised. And so again, it's not, I'm just waiting for it to happen, but it's like, no, I've got a spare tire, or I've got a little can of Fix-A-Flat, or I've got, roadside service. Why? Because tires can go flat. It's not like, oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. What am I going to do? Right? And I think that's what Jesus is saying, is that we live in a world where tires go flat.
But Pastor Troy, the need for resilience is not attractive to us, right? We don't want to have to be strong and to have to endure. We want to never experience, right? Why? And I know you mentioned the word and what Jesus says and to expect it, but why is it that you see so as a pastor, you will see Christians, believers come to you and they will be surprised? Why do you think that is? Is it that we are ignorant of God's word? Is it that we think that we're the exception? Like, why do you believe we are so resistant to leveraging and understanding the need for resilience?
I think because we don't understand the positivity that challenge can bring to our life.
Hold on, Pastor Troy. That's hard for me to hear, right? And so we're saying, well, of course, Pastor Troy Gramling, he's close to God. He's supposed to say that. What do you mean when we talk about the positivity of going through challenge?
Yeah, James talks about it. And James, of course, is the brother of Jesus. James knows what he's talking about. He's at the headquarters of the early church, but he's speaking to a group of people who have lost everything in order to follow Christ. And they're going through a difficult time. And, because they've lost their jobs, their respect from their families, all of that to follow Christ. And he says, count it all joy. When you go, many colors, trials of many colors, many facets come into your life. And you think, well, what does that mean? We tend to want to live out Scripture through willpower. Like, okay, I'm going to count it joy, and you hear it sometimes in people, well, to God be the glory, right? We just say these Christian things, and then people say, well, you're not really living that. You said it, but what I think James is saying, what I understand James to be saying is he says, count it all. That's an accounting, because you remember the New Testament is originally written in Greek, and it's an accounting term. So here's what he's saying. We need to reassign. Accounting, you have debits and credits. And you're like, something comes in, you're like, where do I put this? What account do I put this in? We tend to put difficulty or challenge into the account of trouble. Like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And James is saying, no, you need to put it into a different account, that you need to realize that it is those challenges and difficulties and struggles that's transforming you into the kind of person that you actually desire to be, so that you can experience the kind of success that you've been praying for. And therefore, now, and I'm not saying that this is easy to do. That's why James has to tell us. If it was easy, he wouldn't have to tell us. But he's telling us because it's challenging that when the tire goes flat or when difficulty, so no, I'm going to read the first tendency. Oh my gosh, this is an expense. Let me put it in the expense account. No. Let me reassign it. And let me reassign it to, there's actually an advantage. That's why he's I can count it joy. Not because it feels pleasurable, not because it's enjoyable in the sense that because we tend to go by our emotions or our feelings or what we can see in the short term. This is going to cost me money. This is money that I was going to use it for over here. I got to get out in the hot sun. I got to change the tire, right? All these kind of things. And James is saying, no, reassign it up into, personal growth, who you're going to become if you handle this in the correct way. So you can count it as joy because it's an opportunity to grow. And that's the thing. Opportunities to grow aren't joyful in the moment, And so anyways, I think part of resilience, it's not all, but part of resilience is I've got to immediately tell myself, I've been trying to do this and I got to reassign this. This is not the end of the world. This is not. God is going to do something in me and through me if I allow him. I'll be a better friend, a better husband, a better parent, a better pastor. I'll have greater resilience in the future if I'll look at what's happening different. That's the only. Then it is real. It's a different kind of, not an emotional joy, but it is a different kind of joy because it's like, wow, I got an opportunity. It's kind of like somebody who wants to be a speaker or a singer. Let's say you want to, be a great singer, and then somebody says, "Hey, can you come sing at my event?" Well, that process might not be comfortable. Right. It's like, man, I could fail, but you're still joyful about it. Why? Because it's an opportunity that could lead to where you want to go.
Okay, so my question on behalf of our audience today, they're listening to you, Pastor Troy, here on the Troy Gramling Podcast. They agree with what you're saying. But there is a level of maturity that's needed in order to look at a challenge and find the opportunity in that challenge. So whether it's from you as a pastor, we just talked about being a granddad again. How do we get to the point where we're mature enough to seek out the opportunity instead of immediately going to our first feeling, that emotion of things are bad?
Yeah, we on an earlier podcast got to talk with Dr. Bronner, and he just wrote a book on excellence. And one of the things he talked about is who you're going to be in the future and what impacts who you're going to be in the future. The books that you read, the people you surround yourself with, and what you listen to. We tend to discredit the very thing that we need into our lives to become the people we want to be. It seems too simple, and it's not immediate.
Right.
Like I want immediate maturity. Instead of, no, I'm got to be intentional about what I'm putting in. So what books am I reading? Who am I listening to? Who am I around? What am I not allowing into my life? I mean, those are real important decisions, and it doesn't make a difference today. I can read his book on excellence. It's probably not going to change my life by tomorrow.
Right.
It's part of the maturity, is a part of the process. And we see it. We know that when it comes to little kids or a puppy, we realize that there's a process involved. Overnight, they don't learn to tie their shoe. Overnight, they don't learn to feed themselves. But you have to if you never begin the process, they'll never be able to actually do it. We've all seen kids at a certain age that can't do things, and we're like, isn't that a shame?
Yeah.
And I think, it's the same thing when we see people of a certain age who can't handle the realities of life. And it seems that more and more we see people struggling to handle the realities of life and call those things an illness as opposed to life, and that we all have to deal with. So to me, it's that process. It's a willingness to go through the process. It's like you can have 20 years of experience, or you can have 21 years of experience.
Yep.
And you never, maturity is not one of those things that happens naturally when it comes to when it comes to leadership, when it comes to just being able to handle life situations. You have to be intentional about it.
So one of the purposes here on the Troy Gramling Podcast is to bring a Christian worldview to things that we see every day. And so when you talk about excellence, you mentioned what we listen to, the people around, but you also talk about the books we read. And so I can't help but notice your shirt that says the gospel. Yes. Right. And so that's whether we just talk about the gospel in general or the book, the Bible. The shirt, very nice. But then also when we talk about the gospel and putting something in, for those in our audience who might not be Bible readers, when you talk about reading, like what we put in is going to make all the difference. What does the gospel, how does that impact our understanding of this resilience? Because you keep referencing things that are in the book, in the Bible.
All right, so we'll talk about the gospel in a moment. I do want to mention, since you brought up the shirt, actually there was a young man who has started a brand, and you can see his brand is called Go Into the World. And he brought me a bunch of different shirts and stuff, and I'm always more than thankful for, and this is really good quality and has a great message, a lot of different designs. So again, all he did is he gave me some free shirts. And you know what? I was thinking the other day, we'll probably give some away on the podcast of some of the things he gave me. But to me, it's always exciting because in what we're talking about, when we're talking about growth, we're talking about becoming who God's created us to be. We're talking about success on this podcast over and over again. So when you have somebody that's getting out of their comfort zone, and putting something, not just in their head, not just, hey, I'm starting a brand or whatever, but has actually produced something and going to put it in somebody's hand and then want to sell it. To me, that's worth celebrating.
So hold on, Pastor. So because I'm sure in the process, he had to read about resilience, but then if I'm not mistaken, Brian also had to come in and say, I'm going to actually be resilient in building the company. I'm going to have doors closed in my face. I'm going to have people turn me down. People who say, thank you, but I'm not wearing this. And so it is a true embodiment of what we're talking about here today.
Yeah. Anything you produce, like he put this in my hands. He doesn't know how I'm going to respond to it.
Yeah.
He's not paying me to say nice things. I could never wear it. I could not like it. I could disagree, right? There's a million. It's like your baby. And that's why a lot of folks never actually mature, like we're talking about, because they're so afraid of how people are going to respond that they never get outside of their comfort zone. Now, when we think about the gospel, like the shirt says, it's the good news. And the good news is that Jesus came, and he came to transform us, put on skin. He died on the cross. He took all of our screw ups. That's the message. The message is God didn't come to point our finger. Even that famous verse, John 3:16, and I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it's, they used to hold it up at ball games and those kind of things. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but will have everlasting life. That's the gospel. If you read the very next verse, it says that he didn't come to condemn the world. He didn't come with a pointed finger. He came with open arms, because we already know that we're not perfect. Mm-hmm. And we can choose to either try to be perfect, or we can accept the one who was perfect. And that's why it's good news. He took my imperfections and he gave me his perfection. So when God looks at anybody who's a Christ follower, right? When God looks at me, he doesn't see all my screw ups. Mm-hmm. He sees the perfection of his own son, right? That's who we are in Christ. So that's why we talk about it a lot, right? Mm-hmm. We're not the failure. We're not the one who, because so many times discouragement is the result. We see, the flat tire that we've been talking about or whatever as an obstacle we can't overcome or a challenge that is going to keep us from where we're trying to go. And I think it's always important to remember in Ephesians 2, it says that we are his masterpiece, that we were created on purpose by God. And I've said it a million times, to do something of significance. And it's important to keep that in our mind as we pursue that. And remember, and I hate to keep rumbling on here, but the resilience that he had to go to the cross. In Hebrews, it says that he endured the cross for the joy that was ahead of him. And that's really what we were talking about the whole time so far, is that idea of resilience is looking beyond what you're going through to where it's going to lead you. And that's what Jesus did when he came. He looked beyond the nails and the cross and the torture and the betrayal and all denial, all of that to the outcome of what he was doing.
One thing I love about this podcast, besides the fact that I get to have these conversations with you, we've been looking at the audience, and we don't only have devout Christians, those who are heavy, who have been Christians for years. We also have the Christian curious, who have questions, who are experimenting or exploring. So my question to you, Pastor Troy, if we have someone in the audience today, and they are asking the question, well, what does Christianity have to offer about resilience, about hope that the world doesn't have to offer? What would you say to them? Because they've tried everything that's out there. They've tried, whether it is the illicit drugs, some of the bad things. They've tried the self-help groups. They've bought all of the books. But what is it that Christianity or even the gospel offers to help them be more resilient that they can't find anywhere else?
Yeah, a promise, and because all the other efforts are on you and you alone. If there is no God, then your success is totally dependent upon you. Your happiness is totally dependent upon you. Mm-hmm. That's why morality and all those things become negotiable,
right?
Because it's like at the end of the day, if the only right and wrong is determined by us, mm-hmm. and your right is going to keep me from my happiness, well, I got to decide if I really want to keep your right. Right. Is your right worth my unhappiness? But the great thing about being a Christ follower is we have God's promise, and that, as I said earlier, that he has overcome. He says in Jeremiah to a group of people that had that same, out of nowhere, they get taken and they're exiled into Babylon, and they're angry. God, how can this happen? If you're God and we're your people, then why? And God says, well, I got a plan, and the plan I have for you is not one to harm you, because that's our natural instinct. One, is there a God? And if there is what's he doing? And he says, no, it's not to harm you, but it is one of hope, and it is one of a future. Mm-hmm. And he told them up front, he said, it's not tomorrow. He says, it's down the road. He actually said 70 years. That's a long time. He said, but while you're here, I want you to marry, and I want you to build homes, and I want you to be successful. In other words, there's things for you to accomplish today, but there's also the promise of tomorrow. And I think, and there's a path in which to get there, mm-hmm. right? And I think without Christ, man, you are all on your own. And I hate to think, with all the power in the world that I don't have, all the powerful people that surround me. I mean, whether it be the government, whether it be the police, whether it be the businessman, whether the guy that controls my car, or right, there's all these people have so much impact on my life. And if it's only me, mm-hmm. man, that'll create anxiety. Yeah. Because what can I do? If they decide to raise my electricity, or they decide to raise the rent, right? There's just, the great thing is we have a promise from the all-powerful God who says that he's going to watch over us, that he created us on purpose, that we are his masterpiece, and that he had work for us to do, before we were ever born. So to me, there's a great comfort in that, and not in the sense that it's a crutch, right? I still have to pursue what he's called me to do. It doesn't fall out of the sky. But if I become who he's created me to be, I have the promise of where that's going to lead.
Pastor Troy, how do we, if we've experienced disappointment, how do we keep disappointment with life from turning into disappointment with God?
I think part of that is natural, right? And is to realize that what we're going through is not pleasant, and well, it must be God's fault. That's kind of sometimes the first thing that we want to do. And I think God's big enough to handle that. So I think it's important.
Wait. When you say handle that, what do you mean?
To handle our accusation even. And again, I don't mean in a sense of God. Well, Jeremiah said it like this. Jeremiah had a prophecy that they didn't like. And so he ended up in prison. And then he goes to God and he's like, God, you tricked me. When you called me, this is not where I thought it was going to end up. And he said, I wish I'd have never been born, right? Those are honest emotions that he's feeling because God knows. I mean, we're only lying to ourselves. God knows what we feel anyways. I'm just trying to manipulate God. Why am I afraid to tell God, I don't understand? This is discouraging. I'm tired of hurting. Just all the things that we're really dealing with. I think it's important. God's big enough, and we want to be willing to be honest and to be vulnerable. Not in a hardness. We want to share it before we become hard.
Right.
We want to share it out of our pain and out of our emotion. And then I think Elijah is another great example. And what he did was sometimes it's just physical. Sometimes it's to get the rest that we need or get a healthy meal and to be around some positive people. I think those things are huge when it comes to disappointment towards our circumstances, ending up disappointment with God. And because it is the natural pathway. I was thinking about the Kanye. Kanye was Kanye, and then he was Kanye Christian, and then he was Kanye anti-Christian, and I'm God. And I heard a conversation he was having, and he said the reason he had problems with Jesus is what he said, because he was praying and God didn't answer his prayer. And it was about his family. His family still broke up. And because that's right. Well, God's all powerful.
Right.
And I prayed and I made a Christian album and my family still, broke up. I think what he's feeling, right, had he taken that to God and been, really laid that out, God, I don't understand. I need, right? Then God can step in, the Holy Spirit can step into that. I think being around other people, because we need people to speak into our lives, that kind of look at what God's done and look at that. Some of maybe what you're experiencing is the result of decisions you made, or your wife has a free will. Do you really want her to be a robot? Do you want God to make her and you into robots that you can only do what, right? Again, there's timing. That's not the first thing you want to say to somebody, but I do think that's why community's important. And then I think when we're stressed and overwhelmed, it's very easy to get our hormones and our sleep habits and our eating habits, everything gets out of whack. And it just it's that bad cycle, and God becomes the reason for all of it, and that leads to a very dark place. I mean, again, Kanye's a great example of that. You look at his life right now, and you're just like, you just see the pain, you see the destruction that he's bringing into his own life, into this relationship with his new wife, and all those kind of things. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And it's important to know that that's not just something that happens to celebrities or influencers. It's a path that we can all go down.
Now, everyone might not be able to identify with Kanye at his level, but at some point, many of us, our audience, you and myself included, we might make the statement, as we started out, my life has not gone as planned. What do you say to that person today?
Well, I say, whose plan? That's the...
Wait. Pastor, that is not what I wanted. That is not the plan that I had you to say. Why would you start there?
Well, because that I think is the starting place. Because we all have a plan. If I'm on, first of all, am I honest enough to share what my plan was? Because most of the time my plan is really good. You know what I mean? Like, all kinds of success and influence and not a lot of criticism and travel and just do whatever. But that isn't necessarily what is healthy for me. If you were to ask my kids when they were little or my grandkids today, at the end of the day, they might say, well, this is not what I had planned today. I wanted to do ice cream and I wanted to go to Disney well, just because that was their plan doesn't mean that that's what's best for them. As their parent and now their grandparent, I love them too much to allow them to have what they planned. But if they'll trust me, I'll do with everything within my power to do what's best for them. And I believe that that is true of our Heavenly Father as well, is that I can tell you where I'm at today in my life is not where I planned on being.
Okay.
There's things that I planned to be able to be doing that I can't do. I don't know why, I can say, well, man, I've tried to follow God. I've tried to do all these things. But ultimately it comes down to, well, am I going to trust God with where I'm at? And am I going to then take ownership of what I need to take ownership of? Is there some decisions I've made along the way, right? And those kind of things. As I continue, as we talked earlier, go back to Galatians, that if we'll reap a harvest if we don't give up, don't grow weary. Keep running after what God's called me to do. And again, that's why who you marry is so important. That's why who your friends are so important, because you don't have those people in your life that can remind you of that. Hey, we're gonna keep trusting him.
Yeah.
He's going to come through, Troy. It doesn't feel like, let's keep trusting him. And as we've said on many occasions, at least I'm not going to give up today.
Yeah.
Now tomorrow, maybe I'll choose to give up, but I'm not going to give up today. And each day, it's amazing how much progress you can make when you stop worrying about, I don't know if we're going to be able to make the mortgage. We may have to move. Well, I'm not going to move today. I'm going to trust God for today. I'm not giving up today. Well, how are we going to make payroll? Well, and that's 2 weeks or that's 4 days, but I'm going to trust God today. And it's amazing what God does in those days. And again, I don't know about you guys listening, maybe you want the same thing. I want God to fix it all in one big swoop. Mm-hmm. If it's a money problem, I don't want just enough money for the next meal. I want enough money for
daily bread. Yes. You want the monthly, yearly bread.
Yeah. Why? But we do all have this wrestling match and this tension between, do I want to become who God's created me? Do I want to have a relationship with him where I can trust him for daily bread? Or do I just want, 6 months taken care of, or a year taken care of, or a lottery and I don't have to worry about it again? And we all think about how much easier our life would be. And there may be aspects of our life that would be easier. I wouldn't know Jesus as well. Sadly, to say, it's in the difficulties of life that I am more drawn to him than the successes of life. And so there's no doubt in my mind, if I never had a financial challenge, if I never got sick, if I never had criticism or people hurt me, my relationship with Jesus would look different. I'm wanting those things, though, to transform me into the kind of person that can have that kind of relationship with Christ in success.
Man. Pastor Troy, that is a great way to end where we started. What happens when life doesn't go as planned? where you're telling us to start is whose plan. I think that's a fantastic place. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you once again for hanging out here with us on the Troy Gramling Podcast. If any part of this episode resonated with you, we're going to encourage you to share, to like, to subscribe, of course, but most importantly, get into the comments. Let Pastor Troy know what your thoughts are, where you have been resilient, maybe where you need resilience, and what those challenges are. He will be responding personally, because this is where community begins until we take it to the next level. So Pastor Troy, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to remind you that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Troy Gramling Podcast.
And we can sit and do nothing with it and be guilty of the crime of omission, or we can leverage it to make a kingdom difference.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching today's episode. And if you haven't, be sure and subscribe. And if you enjoyed what we talked about today, you're going to like this one or this one even better.